Yep.
Christina, so what do you say, 7:05?
I mean, we have a good group of people. Good
Yeah.
start
I
whenever.
think 05 is good.
All right, got a minute.
Oh, he's doing Amazing Grace now.
You might have to take us out the window because I'm not getting I can't actually hear the bagpiper.
I don't have the window open, but it's
Oh, okay.
so yeah, it's okay. I mean, next time, I promise.
Next time, okay. All right, I'm gonna mute.
Okay.
Me too.
should we start?
Why mute? Why mute? Look, there you are.
Okay, everyone. Welcome to Movie Club. This is a collaborative forum for viewing and discussing video and film-based art. And we are currently co-organized by students and faculty, by Anthony, AK, by Maya, Alina, and myself. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for the fourth installment with a Q&A with the artist Harry Dodge, moderated by Alina Jakirevich. And please join us next week for Movie Club with a work by Anja Kirschner and a discussion on Wednesday, May 13 at 1:30. I want to take a moment to mention the Hunter MFA Artist Emergency Relief Campaign. The Hunter Student Organization raises money to support MFA students who are suffering financial loss due to COVID. And if you can, please donate to the fund. I will post the link in the chat later. The first 30 minutes will be a discussion with our moderator, followed by a 30-minute open Q&A. If you want to ask a question, please leave a note in the chat and we will call on you. Please mute your Zoom until you are called on. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Harry. What's up?
Hi everybody. How's it going?
Thank you so much for doing this and for coming. Personally, I'm very, very excited. To the audience, I will say that I'm going to talk about some works that weren't even on the list, just because I love them so much, and there's never enough. And I will ask questions that I hope will be good for everybody, but for me that are really, really personal, and they come from just how passionate and affected I felt by the works.
Great.
Yeah, I suppose.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I was gonna say to see everyone's face, but everyone just disappeared their faces. So
They kind of have to, because otherwise it's heavy on the software.
oh, is that what happens? Look, everyone's
Yeah,
gone.
yeah.
Bye,
Yeah,
everybody. Bye. Bye.
Yeah, we ask people to go off camera,
Oh, so, okay.
because otherwise everything goes a little too slow. But then they come back when they're asking questions and stuff.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Thanks for having me.
So my first question is about text. I was very touched by the way I found your videos as a kind of a way to present text. I mean, there's a lot of writing, and the writing is extremely explicit, and there's a lot of it, and there's a lot of information in it. And I will simply just say that in my experience, you find a way to say exactly what you feel like saying through work. And then, so you write a text that is very detailed and stuff, and is very like, you know, what about what you want to talk about. For example, like in Mysterious Fires, like it's a very specific text about a very specific kind of interest, but then the video is done in such a way that, or also in Heavy Bombardment, like the visuals are taking you in so strongly that it magnifies the text in a very powerful way. So I want to ask you about that, about the writing process, and then about how you are actually linking writing and the shape it takes visually.
Okay. And also, I get really nervous talking. So if I go off like in some weird direction and don't answer your question, feel free to follow up and prod me
Absolutely.
for the answer that you're looking for. But this is actually a great question to start on, because it kind of gets right to the heart of art making in a lot of ways. There are things that I'm interested in. I really, will tell my students and feel so for myself that it's best for us to learn to, and then once we learn to kind of stay right on top of our interests and try to make them and try to look into the hot spots and stick with the most specific part of the interests. And once we get to that spot in either form or thought, then even try to get even a little more specific with sort of moving into things. And it feels to me like that specificity, whether it be a sort of theoretical text or a kind of comedic kinds of things, that specificity is ultimately ends up making the video work more accessible. Anyway, but sort of back to this other idea. So I'll have interest. It really just depends on what work we're talking about, but say like Mysterious Fires, where I was kind of deep into all of this reading on artificial intelligence. And then from there, I started to get deep into a kind of strain of artificial intelligence, which is super intelligence. And I was reading all of that, and then I was putting together a show, and it was often I'll put together the sculptures, and then usually after the sculptures are all done and titled, then I usually start on the videos, and then once the videos are done, I'll start on the drawings if there are to be drawings. So it's time to make the videos, and I made a feature film in around 2000, and we kind of taught ourselves.
One.
What's that? By
Fantastic one.
We taught ourselves to make them. That was the first movie we ever made. We made no shorts or anything, and so we read a lot of screenwriting books, and in all the screenwriting books, the rule is show, don't tell. It's a visual format. So don't have your person, walk into the room and say, I'm very angry. You want to find a way in the script and in the movie, these are the conventions, of having them throw a glass down or, whatever. They're going to do it without language. And that was really interesting to me in reading those books all those years ago, because I'm really interested in language and I always have been. So the news that I wasn't going to be able to tell everybody everything in language, that I was going to have to figure out how to show it visually was like a mixed bag of news for me. So long story long, when it came time to make video art, one of the jokes that I've been sort of touching a lot is this sort of idea that it's transgressive to draw you into a visual medium where conventionally anyway, films are for showing images. I'm going to draw you into a visual medium, but then just fucking talk your head off and blab. And I started doing that with movies where even the person in Ass and the Lapdog, the person, 4 or 5 different people will just tell you the movie that they are planning on making. So that's a long-standing, it's kind of like a transgression, or it's a joke, or it's a rudeness, or it's a not doing it right, and it's profuse. So there's that part of it. Then the other part is, can I pull it off? It's a lot of language in a lot of cases, and can I pull it off? And so there are things I'll do that I think of as social, which is to say, I grew up on comedy, and I grew up in a kind of pop culture, lowbrow swirl, And I'm not against those, touching those forms and kind of transmuting them in order to make things feel social, generous, friendly, upfront, in form. And so the use of humor or the use of maybe a cartoon quality is one of the ways that I try to balance out the what do they call that? What do they call it? Demanding profusion of language that often I'll introduce. And so I'm glad to hear that the visuals that I may choose will actually like loft and buoy the text so that it's actually still hearable. Yeah, that's good to know. I mean, I came from performance, and in those days I was still yapping a lot of text, just the way I am now. But I had too much going on in the background often. And I got a lot of reports when I was, 19, 20, 21, like, we can't watch a bunch of slides and have a bunch of dancers back there and hear your monologue. I can't do it. So there is a sort of balance.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of humor. I mean, in the Lapdog, there's some moment, for example, there's always a lot of humor in all your work, but when someone is like, oh, I don't know, it doesn't exactly remind me of home, but I can tell you something about where I come from, and you're like, I don't really have time.
Yeah.
And also the visuals are doing something very, in Late Heavy Bombardment, it's animation work, and then each character is like, whoa, something like an alien robot, what is that?
Yeah.
Or in Mysteries Fires, it's like, what is even, it's so, this figure, and then the hand is painted pink, and you're like, I can't take my eyes of it, so I listen. But the humor part is also something that I think it's funny to ask people about humor in their work, because humor is humor. But if you still want to say something about that can be cool.
Humor, I think it's a tool, it's a strategy. Yeah. It's something I'm naturally drawn to, but I really, like, my big secret is that I'm a very serious person, and I have these sort of very grave, very intense, feverish interests, and one of the things that can blow my socks off is when someone can use humor to deliver really hard news too. And so I really like, I think of it as bravado, or a kind of catty, gallows humor or something, that I really respect, a kind of buoying humor that can get you through a hard time and be empowering, or sort of like sort of transform indignities by taking them in and delivering a sort of sarcastic or a humorous comment back. So those are some things about humor. And there's another thing about humor, which is that I think it's social, and it's, again, a strategy and a way to keep people with you, because it's really easy to walk by video art in a gallery. It's there's often not chairs, and there's often and so that's one thing, is to, like, figure out how to keep people with you. And then the other thing is, like, a lot of my movies, you'll see a lot of them, they're kind of funny, sad. There's a pathos, funny, sad. And then suddenly at the end, it's just fucking sad, And so, sorry about that, And same thing with Mysterious Fires. Love Streams ends on a kind of question mark, but a kind of pathos with a question mark, where we sort of suddenly finish saying, I'm driving the ship or something. I can't quite remember. Yeah. But, like, who's driving the ship? And there's a kind of pathos in that. And so I tend always to end with a bit of a kind of emotional ending or a sort of pathos there. And there's one movie I have called Fred Can Never Be Called Bald, which is 39 minutes of it's really not funny. That's the only one. Watch out for that one.
Yeah. And speaking about humor, which is, I think, from the world of lightness, there's also some kind of lightness in the actual way the things are made, and I'm talking about technology. I mean, the works are, I don't know what camera it is. I guess it's different cameras on each and every one, but I think some of them are VHS, or I'm just saying, the quality, it seemed to me like you're not gonna fight over the HD 4K and on account of just making whatever you want to make. And obviously in my imagination, it's a question of money, but it's probably also just a question of convenience and being comfortable. And I found the kind of grainy aesthetic very much part of everything that's going on. I mean, I'm not focusing now on shiny skin or on, you know, super hyper detailed. I'm focusing on the action and on the urgency of filming. And yeah, that's also an interesting question for me.
That's interesting. You know, I have had the same camera, and it was a question of money when I got that camera. I got it from the CalArts film department, and no one was using it anymore. It was so old, and they had gone on all to their 4K stuff. And so when the film school there had their sale, that was when I picked it up. But it was the first mini DV video camera that had like a flicker in it, so it didn't look like a soap opera. In the 90s, the inexpensive cameras and all the video really just it looked really very specific to itself, and I didn't like that at the time. I was really disappointed by that, and it seemed like everything looked and felt awful to watch in that format. And they were trying to tell us to use that to make By Hook or By Crook, and because we couldn't get enough money to use film, and right then Harmony Korine, I think, made Julian Donkey Boy, which was one of the first movies that used a video camera, one of the first sort of like crossover feature films that had used a video camera. And I watched that, and it was so amazing that I thought, well, we can do that. So he had shot that on a mini DV, I think, and then put it through a negative bath or something, and then another negative bath. So it had really, really knocked it down, we called it at that point. And so that was the camera we used. It was some Panasonic 9 or something. It was like a prosumer. And so that was and then you would put this effect on called 24p, which was a kind of flicker. So when I had the chance, I just got one of those, and I've been using it ever since. And part of that is because I'm not interested in technology. And so learning a new camera would be fucking annoying to me. But it seems about time to do it, because I think the camera's just getting so old, and I was trying to transfer mini DV last year, and it was actually hard to do. I couldn't find the right cables, and none of my computer didn't want to like read it anymore. Anyway, not to bore you with the tech stuff, but my point is yeah, initially it was money. I have a job now. I could probably get the camera I want, and maybe I will soon. But it's interesting. It makes me think of Zoom right now, because someone was saying a couple days ago, Zoom is so exhausting because there's so much, so our brains are sort of attuned to reading these micro musculature movements of the face in order to assess how the socializing is going. Like, how am I doing? And apparently Zoom blurs out some of that stuff in order to get the machine to run more smoothly, to get the, so that's a really interesting discussion about basically resolution. And I've been having the experience with Zoom that if someone is a large picture, if I'm talking to 1 or 2 or 3 or even 4 people, I don't find it exhausting. To me, it's very similar to having a regular conversation. so I was kind of like, are they really trimming off the micromusculature? You know, because I'm not finding it that exhausting. On the other hand, you're saying that the low resolution presentation in my movies allows you not to be thinking about resolution, basically. What do you think? Do you think that you're missing the micromusculature or you're not?
No, I think I can focus much better on the language, and I think everybody looks better not on HD.
Yeah,
that's a fact. I mean, and everybody looks. I mean, it's true, and everybody looks better on manual film, you know, and like because it's based on light and not on pixel, and like people just look better and more natural. It's something we don't maybe think about a lot when we transition to digital, everything digital. I mean, it's much harder to look good on HD.
It makes you think about resolution, right? Because like we want a high resolution, and yet we're not seeing, like, I'm not looking at my dog here in a really high resolution, in that high a resolution. So it actually provides something that's off, that feels off.
Yeah, kind of feels like if you have to have makeup on you if you want to be filming, if you want to be filmed on HD, but it more than anything, it made me feel like you had to film whatever you were filming at that moment, and that mattered more than getting some equipment.
Yeah.
And that was very inspiring to me, and actually very liberating, because I think, you know, it's not only me, but artists are like sometimes like, oh, I don't have the right, like, and then I think, you know what, fuck it. I have to have information in my frame. That's what I need to have.
Yeah.
And then
yeah, I mean, unless your movie is about things being high resolution, then you do need that tool.
yeah.
I think, you know, for me, I'm a short time after finishing By Hook or by Crook, I really like changed my set of interests. You know, my set of interests before that was kind of a more emotional set of interests, and it had to do with accompaniment, and it had to do with emotionality, and there was something more interested in that, and then sometime after that I really started to get interested in structure and structural flows and the kinds of messaging that's possible in the pattern of the relationships that I'm filming. So the sort of meta text or the subtext or both, which isn't the text necessarily. And so I think I'm always trying to find a way to take people out. I want to give them a little story to keep them with me and to keep things entertained, but I want to interrupt it so that people can remember to think about some other crap and not just come at me like it's a soap opera or some tight story that they were watching. So I do try to make it challenging and just sort of keep people on their toes. But, you know, the whole Brechtian thing, as I understand it, isn't that it's not entertaining. It's that there are interruptions to a good time that sort of bring you back into your thinking processes. And I'm very interested in that blend and to have conversations about structure.
But it is good time, and it is fun, and I think the editing, the very kind of, you know, I don't want to say heavy editing, but the editing has a beat in it. It's, you know, it's like dancing. There is a beat, and it is entertaining in a good sense. It's like captivating will be the word.
Yeah.
And also this leads me to talking about how you reveal the way that things were made. I mean, Mysterious Fires is the best example because we actually see you directing. And it's not directing, I mean, there are different models of directing, but here you actually want the actress to imitate you, which is a very kind of direct sense of directing.
It's a bossy thing.
No, I don't know if it's bossy, but it's like I'm performing do your hand, do this.
Yeah.
And we can actually learn how you think that things should be said and how they get better when you say them for the second time, for the third time, for the fourth time, also in live streams. But you not only make the work, then you also let us see how you made it. Yeah. And this whole mechanism, once it's revealed, it's as if, for me, you're not only satisfied with the power of the work, you also are showing me the tools, and you're not even intimidated by it. And that's another thing that I was thinking maybe is interesting to talk about, how you let us have this glimpse on the process of making, which is also like, yeah, again, funny. Like, I think, yeah, in the lapdog, it's really towards the end when you're like, say it exactly the same way again. And, but you're not afraid of giving it away.
I'm actually, as I was saying before, I want to sell it, but then I also want you to not be totally sold and disappeared into the seamlessness I've created by adding so many seams. So a lot of those edits that you're talking about are, especially in the Ass and the Lapdog, I'm actually creating sentences that didn't exist before. So there's a ton of edits, there's a ton of massaging each of the edits, and I'm creating, normally, and you see it in Mysterious Fires, I have someone reading the script sentence by sentence to a performer or myself, and we don't have to memorize anything. And that also keeps the velocity going. So they don't have to memorize crap and then come at me 3 months later and spend a lot of time, and stuff like that. It's a little easier. So they give a sentence, and if the performer can remember a whole sentence, they just regurgitate it. Or sometimes they can't remember it, so they get half a sentence. And then later I drop all that out and I sew them all together as if there's these kind of totally voluble, lugubrious speakers. And it sounds like I have a kind of pride in being able to create those the illusion of logorrhea. And then I think that was one of the first times in the Ass and the Lapdog when at the end I thought, I think part of the messaging system of the movie needs this thing to be broken. And so I started to edit in a little bit of that, and it's kind of it's built in as a reveal, which adds meaning. Because now there's a director, there's a documentarian, there's like the theater of the documentarian, and we knew that was a performance role or whatever, but now there's the actual director talking. And then I expanded upon that in Mysterious Fires. In Mysterious Fires, though, this weird thing happened, which was that we filmed it, and I had 2 cameras rolling, one on each of the performers, one who was myself, obviously. When I went to edit, it was going to be a movie like all my other movies where most of that got cut out. And I was just selling this interview between these 2 people, the old man and the AI, the human level of machine intelligence, HLMI. And then I saw all of the fun that we had that day. And that usually happens when I film, like we get the giggles and it's just a riot. It's so fun. And we're kind of rolling, we can't, and I usually cut all that out. And the movie's the movie, and I get real serious in the editing and maybe give you a little glimpse. Oh yeah, this is an edited piece, I'll give you a little repetition or I'll give you that. But on Mysterious Fires, I decided to change the whole thing and have the making of the film be one of the constructed layers. And so when I do that, though, that's not just making the same movie and obviously letting people know how it was made. It adds a whole other meta layer about making. And in this case, I feel like in Mysterious Fires, it was really a messaging system about error and because the text is about AIs possibly going wrong, right? Right. And so I realized that if I left in all these errors and all of the giggling about it, that I could make a different kind of movie that was actually a little bit about control and the urge to control, but also a little bit about error and the kinds of things that the unexpected might knit together socially. One. And two, I realized that it would be a movie about how art can emerge, form can emerge from the informal, and often does emerge from the informal, that things like Fred Moten says get kind of combed, that your life and the energy, the sort of unorganized energy that's naturally organizing or whatever, not to use that word, but kind of gets combed into the art, and the sociality that's already energy flowing gets combed in. And I was super interested in that too. And that was a whole new thing in Mysterious Fires.
Yeah, great. I have one last question.
All right.
The performativity, the way you perform, I find very, very central. It ends up with actors and actresses replicating you. So it's very much about the way you perform and how you perform. And in Love Streams, there's a lot of star quality going on. Either it's you or the people you choose, but there's a lot of that, holding the screen, being this, being able to perform. And maybe I'm asking this question because secretly and personally, I just kind of want to be already older. But I'm very curious about how you feel about you changing throughout the time. The way we were performing By Hook or By Crook is different than the way you're performing now, just because you change and the body language changes and a lot of things change. And the way I read it, you like the change. And yeah, I just want to ask about how does it feel, you're making work, and throughout the years, you are able to give a different type of performance, and yeah.
Are you asking about, what are you asking about? Because first you started saying there's a lot of like a beaming, trying to beam out, energy, like as like performativity. But then later you were saying kind of like there was one kind of performance in By Hook or By Crook, and it's because I'm getting older, it's changing. So I can't quite understand your question.
Oh, I don't know if it's only age. It's just time. Yeah, maybe it's a language issue, just because I'm not a native speaker. But I'm just saying, the change is natural to any kind of performer. My read when I look at your work is that you get more comfortable performing with time. And not that you were at some point not comfortable, but I am just curious about how it feels. You are probably reflecting on your own performance each and every time. And I just see it as like something that is fettered throughout your making process. Is that clear now? I don't know.
A little bit clearer. I can say, that growing up, all of my heroes, not all of them, but many of my heroes were singers and dancers, the singer-dancer ladies, And my favorite is still Bette Midler. Like, to me, she's the only celebrity, and she still is the only celebrity. And but she was like wild, and she was bad. She was like bad woman, and I think I felt like a bad woman, and I liked her version of it. I didn't necessarily want to be her version of it, but I wanted to be her. And I just thought she was rude and perfect. And I also really like Barbra Streisand, and I liked the singer dancer ladies, and I would have done anything to do that. And I really badly wanted to be a performer. And I was too nervous. I was, I had a really like a bad childhood and bullied and everything. So it was really much, I was almost like in my mid-20s when I finally dared to do a monologue or something, whatever that was, in San Francisco in the 90s. And right away it made me very nervous. And yet I somehow could do it. I was okay at it. And I would just like burst out with all this energy once I got on stage. And when I made a movie, I realized that no one, that you didn't need to give all that in a film, because the camera would come and get you right on your face, and you just didn't need to be like going crazy. And so I think that was huge. I watched the dailies and I was like, okay, that's not working. That's really not working. And so I think I was doing a character that I had sort of done on stage, the kind of nervous inner guy that maybe I always felt like, but I was kind of amping it up for stage performance, and then brought it to the movie. And then since then I've been feeling more repressed. So the opposite of what you think. And I'm kind of just quieter. When the camera gets on me, I'm a little camera shy, and I just feel like, all right, I'm just gonna do some stuff here. And I'm trying to do it. And yet there's a way that I wish I was a little more, fantastic, magnificent or something. So maybe what you're reading is just the like magnificence that's like all aspirational, leaking out in spite of myself or something. I don't know.
Yeah, what did that
It's
read?
funny to be in a movie or not be in it, and to choose performers. And the way I was doing it is, trying to get them to talk like me. And so, there is something to trying to make a video and trying to, get people to do the performance that you're looking for. It can be tricky, but they're very constructed. And even though I might have often wanted to make a movie or performance where things are revealed and slowly shit happens and you just let it happen, and if it gets a little boring, that's got to be okay. I always think, because I love watching stuff like that. And then whenever I'm about to, I just can't.
Yeah.
I do it. I start to tighten it up and distill it and stuff, in spite of sometimes maybe my better interests or thoughts.
I see. Harry, I have to let the Q&A happen.
Great.
But
nice talking to you.
And I'm really happy that I'm very happy. And also I hope that people are gonna ask some stuff about the new book, because I did not have time to get to it.
Okay.
But that's
Here's
my
a picture.
Yeah.
A picture. Okay.
Okay, so Christina will take it from here to the Q&As.
Okay, great.
Great. Anna Sophie, do you want to ask your question in person? You can switch your camera on for that, maybe.
Sure. If it doesn't ruin the connection, let's try. Hi. Thanks for doing that. It's very wonderful. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how silliness can facilitate sadness.
Yeah.
And then I want to ask about how you find a good collaborator. I want to hear a little bit about, like, a lot of your work seems to be about standing up to an oppressor. And I wonder if you like see your own practice as being like therapeutic somehow, and so like how do you navigate that space? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a lot of questions. Well, I'm going to write them down.
Sorry.
One is about silliness and sadness. And the second one is about how to find a good collaborator. And then the third one is, what? What's the third one?
How whether or not you see your practice as being therapeutic.
Yeah.
And if so, how do you navigate that? Also, please don't hold back on the rants. That's why we're here.
Okay, you want some rants? I don't think of my artwork as therapeutic, and I just don't. And I generally, weirdly, it might be therapeutic, you know, to someone making art, and it might be therapeutic to walk down the street and accidentally have a conversation with someone, you know. So I'm not sure like what the word actually means. But I think that I don't necessarily make art thinking of it as therapeutic. I think of it, I think I make it as like two things: telling the truth about what I'm interested in, so that I could have a conversation, so that it's like a missive out to the world. It's social. It's trying to tell the truth about something, you know, and it's also trying to ask questions, like let you know what my questions are, or where my research is at, and hopefully someone finds something social in that. And I do find that art as a mediating object is totally inspiring, as something to meet around and something to meet over. And so there's that. I did write about my birth mother in the book, in My Meteorite. And by the end of the book, I had very different feelings about her. And so I think in a weird way, and that was the only piece of art where that ever sort of happened, where I actually had a big weird change. And so I think it was accidentally therapeutic to write that, that's just to say I didn't write it for therapeutic reasons, but that may have happened. And then I think that my thoughts about silliness and sadness is that, you know, I really, in some ways, feel like silliness, like I was saying before, I feel like it's a coping strategy. For some people, it's not for everyone. But I when possible, I feel like there's a buoying quality to it. And I don't feel like it's the opposite of sadness at all. I feel like that those things are very interlinked. And I believe in that as an experiment. And I think, you know, I came of age and through the late 80s and the early 90s, and, you know, it was the AIDS, there was an AIDS epidemic going on, and there was so much death and sadness and awful stuff, and there still is. But this was a moment in San Francisco, and you know, my political awakenings and my comings of age around all kinds of situations were happening, and it was all very, very grim and serious. And then I opened a cafe, and then I went to this gallery next door called Kiki Gallery, which was run by this guy called Rick Jacobson. And he was so cool. He was having these weird shows, and I remember being a little mad. Let me get rid of my dog. I remember he was having these weird shows that were a little high art for me. They were a little conceptual, and I was suspicious. And I went over there one day. He had the first show was called Kaka at Kiki. And I was like, oh, maybe this guy's not so bad, you know, and maybe this will be funny. And I went over there, and it was not very gross. It was like kind of cutesy, and I was unconvinced. I was like, I don't know what he's doing. And the second show was called Sick Joke, and it was called Bitterness, Irony, and Sarcasm in the second AIDS decade. It was about 1992. And I walked in, and there were some like get well cards, and you would open it up and say, you know, the front would say get well soon, and you'd open it up and it'd say, just kidding, you're on the placebo. And there was all kinds of really sarcastic, grim artwork, which was spine tingling and gave me shivers and blew my mind, because the idea that you could get some kind of sarcasm or anything but earnestness next to these high stakes possibilities seemed so unlikely to me. It just blew my mind open. And then there was this little essay, which I can send to Alina or AK and maybe they can forward it. There was a little essay that I took away and read on the way home, and it was called Sick Joke. And it talked about this idea where these certain indignities can be sort of turned around and morphed and reified and used as weapons when sort of turned back on people in the right way. And that was my first sense of the power of that buoying quality. And humor may be the wrong word, but, you know, of irony. And humor may be a kind of weird, grim humor. So I've never been the same after that. I really cleaved my life in two. And so it's a kind of mode that I still carry with me, and I look for and I appreciate. And I really like when artworks, you know, jab around at stuff that feels a little nerve-wracking, and yet there's something in riding that edge sometimes that is very productive. I find very productive as a viewer. So that's what I'll say about that. And finding a collaborator. Good luck.
Fantastic answer. Chris wants to jump in with the next question.
Okay.
Chris, can you unmute yourself?
Hello.
Hey, Chris.
Hi, and Stephen, who's going to ask the question.
Chris
Yeah.
and Steve, okay.
Our question is, we were wondering about what your sort of process is for creating the language in your work, and how much of it is written and sort of memorized, and how much is kind of like improvisational or play. Like, how do you arrive at the language that you create?
I have all kinds of here's Billy.
Hi, Billy.
I have all kinds of ways, but you know, writing is how I do it, and it's always all written. There's so much done beforehand. I'm not a great improviser because I'm too shy. I'm too camera shy. So if you point a camera at me, actually the Fudgesicle, which you guys watched, that's the only movie I've made that was improvised. But other than that, everything is written out. And even these weird long things that seem like totally just weird logarithmic improvisations are written out. And all of my performances that would last for an hour, hour and a half, that appeared to be improvised, even in the old days, those were also written out and memorized. But I would in those days rehearse so much that it seemed like I was just talking like a regular person, like it would sound like just like this, but it was actually all written out. You would only know that if you came 2 days in a row and it was the exact same everything, you know. But the way I do that is really writing a lot and then editing. I think that for me, you have to just sit there. It's never easy to write. It's never easy for me to write. And I think I have to just make myself do 2 or 3 hours or 4 hours every morning, or, you know, something like that. If something needs to happen, you need to make it happen. It doesn't just accidentally happen, especially writing. You really just have to be there writing it out and writing it out and writing it out and making way too much of it, because a lot of times for me, what comes out first is garbagey. And then it starts to be a little better. And then there's like these weird sweet spots that happen if you're in the practice. But if you're not practicing, whether that's sculpture, whatever, you know, if you're not practicing, it can be, for me anyway, it's harder to just like blurt something out and have it be productive. So I start almost all videos and performances sitting at a computer, sitting at a keyboard, and I'm very happy typing things into the keyboard. This feels like this kind of great escape from shopping and gathering that sculpture takes, you know. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but it's basically just churning out a lot of words and then editing them and taking out the bad parts, which is also how I make video too. I shoot, and then it's a bad movie, and you're editing, and then pretty soon it's fine. Then I stop. It's not terrible, stop.
Maybe I have a follow-up question to what you just said about the Fudgesicle.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how that came together?
The Fudgesicle I made when I was in grad school at Bard, and that was the budding of my interests in kind of structural messaging systems, and I was really into this idea of mixing and hybridity and one thing not being another thing. and sort of profusion and contamination. And I kept thinking of the color brown, and I kept thinking of the color gray in those terms. And then I thought of a fudgesicle, which was kind of a jokey kind of poop, a joke. But at the same time, I thought it might be good to have a fudgesicle costume. So I made that costume. And I was happy making that. I got some sort of rigid foam and cut out a face hole. And then I didn't know what to do with it. And I thought, oh, I guess I gotta put it on and make a video. And I was angry and I was scared and I didn't want to make the video. And I went into my studio and it was hot in there and I didn't know what I was going to do. And like I said, I'm not a big improviser, but I have dated a lot of dancers and they always tell me about improvising, it's contact improv stuff. And I did maybe a theater class or two in high school, but I remember for some reason these little bits of things that seemed so amazing about the improv rules. And one was say yes to the moment or yes to what comes up. If your partner kind of says like, okay, I'm going to roll over your back, you don't go like, no, you just say yes to the moment and let them roll over your back. And then the other thing was, so I didn't have a partner there. So I was forced to say yes to myself, but also don't try and be in a different moment. Try to just be with how you're feeling right at the moment, and sometimes that's in improv, I guess. I mean, Alex knows more about this than I. You take a little inventory. So you're kind of like, how am I actually feeling right now? And instead of trying to be happy when you feel like shit or angry or frustrated or scared, let yourself be frustrated and scared. So once I got in there and got the outfit and got the camera moving, you can see I started to pretend there was an interviewer, and that just kind of came out of the blue. And so I was like, hi, yeah. And so maybe the interviewer, so I started to pretend that he was asking me questions, and I was like, yeah, I'm angry. I'm hot, so then I started to just verbally do the inventory and sort of let things go from there. And then that was just a long take of that. And then I tried to do a little dancing and that ended up getting edited in as well. There's a little intercutting in that, not a lot.
I really want to throw the ball back to the crowd. Anyone questions? Don't be shy. Leo, just jump in.
Hello. So, sorry. Hi. Yeah, I have a question. I guess with the selection of films that we got from like the list, there was this kind of like running thread of like implied action. Like a lot actually hinged on like being told a story, or which I appreciated, this sort of like spare elements. The editing was always just tight enough to hold you visually, that if a rant happened, you could still roll with it. But this feeling of, the space that you leave to imagine something, be it the unkillable story or, the let the good times roll, sort of like talking back and forth. Even the like alien thing, like a lot of that was just like what was being said more than like necessarily visually. And I think that it seems like that's part of your content. Actually, it's not just like a device for doing something. So I want to hear a little more about that as like a concept, a thread.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. I think I'm actually very interested in the kind of seeming paradox of virtuality or mental spaces or the imaginary, if you will. And I'm sort of obsessed with that, and I have been for years. And I feel like in video, and at the beginning I did address this a little bit, and I said it in some ways it's a kind of fuck you to the conventions of image production, and saying I'm not going to give you a bunch of visual images. I'm going to give you some language, and so I'm doing it wrong. But you're right; it goes beyond that, and I feel like there's in all of the movies the content is we're going to do this in your head, then, and that's real. What's happening in your head is real. Thinking is an action. It's a real thing. And the kind of world making that can happen in an imaginary space or a virtual space or by language, those are productive things, and thought is material that actually changes stuff. And so there's a lot of little subtle messages or meaning making mechanisms there that have to do with a kind of valuation of the mental, and also have to do with materiality, a kind of rethinking of what materiality is. In that I am a deep materialist, and I think everything is material and nothing's not material. And so sometimes the hardest thing to think about as material is thoughts and mental spaces. And so that's a kind of deeper project.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. Also, I'm gonna take a second to totally fanboy and just say I just got your book. I'm really excited to read it.
Great.
Yeah.
Woohoo! Great. Thank you. Thanks for your question. Appreciate it.
Okay. Hey, Harry, I was gonna jump on that actually, and I did want to ask you about the book. I had another question, maybe like following up on what Leo brought up, thinking about science in relationship to the imaginary as sort of subject matter, or I don't know. I'm wondering about how you're thinking about that, and I'm thinking particularly about love streams here. Sorry, I was working out while you were talking, so I'm out of breath. But anyways,
I'm like, what have you been doing?
I did shoulder presses. Anyways, so yeah, I was just wondering about that in love streams in particular, but also in the I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the title, but the
Spiders.
Yeah, exactly. And then wondering about, because I haven't read the book yet, but I'm thinking I'm kind of wondering about that process and how that sort of writing maybe differs from writing for performance, but also the title itself also does this thing of bringing a kind of relationship to like a kind of concept that is both imaginary and real in terms of how it relates to science. So that's kind of messy set of questions, but just wondering if that's yeah.
What's the last question? The title of the book?
Yeah, I was just wondering about the book and the process of writing it, and sort of how that connects, maybe, because just guessing, I haven't read it yet. I'm looking forward to it, to this kind of using the scientific and the imaginary in the conversation with each other.
Well, the book, it was different writing the book than writing for performance. It was absolutely different. I have never, I've never been a journal keeper. Any journal that I've ever kept has just bored the shit out of me. Even making the sentences that describe real things just puts me right to sleep. And I have never done that. So it's weird that I ended up starting at one point in 2016 to start to take notes on what had happened that day. And they were just notes, so I didn't have to bore myself with sort of writing them out at length. It was more like, went to somewhere, did this, went somewhere, did this, and then like a little detail about it, So the book is very different than the writing in the videos. It's really different for the most part. There's like almost like a few different voices even that are in the book. And one is science guy. And it's like, here's some information about meteorites. They're made from this, and often they fall in this direction. And then there's science guy with, a little quantum field theory, or, there's a little science guy with, AI and superintelligence. And all of that is a kind of writing that is hard to make jaunty. And I was letting it be sort of tonally plaintive. And yet the book as a whole starts to weave that together with my ideas that there is that science isn't wholly different from fantasy, in that the people who are looking for stuff have to often conceive of something before it's found or something. I'm not quite saying that right, but you know what I mean. There's something fantastic about science. And so it has this kind of bad rap of trying to answer all the questions and making everything boring or blah, blah, blah. But to me, I don't have that experience of it. really at all. The parts that I love, and I'm kind of a selective viewer of things, are the parts that are just fantastic and seem to uncover things that are absolutely amazing and unbelievable and blow my mind off. And so, and I have followed those things, and I always have. But where I was trying to get to in the book is trying to slowly, by sedimentation and by it's like a video. It's a time-based project. And so you sort of lay stuff out here, and then you lay something else out there, and it starts to rhyme and starts to reverberate. And the idea is, you know, and I tell these stories about my birth mother and the weird things that we had, coincidences that took place when we met and things were revealed. Weirdly, we had this science fiction book in common, and about these dreaming jewels. And so, you know, it starts to sort of like layer up the science that almost led me into making the book in the first place. It's like the personal stuff came second. I'm not that, it's not like I have a big agenda. I want to tell people real facts about my life, you know. That's not my thing. I kind of want to talk about structures and stuff. So the book tries to weave together a sense that science, and I'm real big into the unsaid. So that science kind of buoys fantastic things that are happening that we are aware of and also not aware of. So there's that, and then that was very different writing. And then I guess that answers all three of your questions. Yeah.
You know, I one other thing, I just watched the Cassavetes Love Streams film, and I was wondering if you, which is like his last film, right? It's like 1984, I think. And I was wondering if that was something that you were at all referring to, or if you were thinking about some other love streams.
No, it was riffing on Cassavetes. Cassavetes is one of my earliest inspirations for how to direct, basically, how to get something moving on set that is teased up and real, and then try to get a camera on it, maybe burning film, burning video. That was my first idea about how to make a movie. And I was very interested in the close-up, and who doesn't love Jenna?
Right. Also,
like, if I met Jenna, I would also be on my knees too, not just Bet, maybe Jenna too. So to refer back to that with this title, I mean, and it's a play on that because I'm interested in love and sort of redefining it as all of the meat that's between us, not just the pleasant or the erotic, but what if we start to talk about all of the air that's between all of us as thick with relation and thick with gravity or something, this kind of meat that by which we exchange and change each other. And so I was looking for a title that sort of talked about that a little bit. And you know, that movie is just basically all jokes about remote interconnectedness, you know.
Yeah, and they're brother and sister in that one, which is the craziest part. At the end, they say like, "Oh, you're my brother," and they're not even married in it. It's just insane. Anyway, all right. Thank you. I'll
Thanks for your question.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to see you.
You too.
Thank you, Alex. Oh, we have another question. Do you want to ask your question yourself? Question about audio. I can also read it out. What's your relationship to skateboarding because of the Reynolds shirt?
My son skates. And I'm not sure where I got this shirt, but it seemed like the shirt for the day. And look, it's got a big white picture on the back, big white skateboarding pool or something. That's it.
Well, so I think I'm going to wrap this up.
All right.
Do you want to show us your book again?
Yeah, I do.
It's a little short.
That's the front, and that's the back, and that's the side. Is that the right side? Yeah, and there's a hardcover too in the UK, which is also beautiful. I haven't even touched one yet, but I'm sure there's somewhere. It's a different publisher, and they decided to make a hardcover, so that would be nice to see someday. But yeah, it's been a long, strange trip, but it's nice to to see everybody and to talk to you.
Yeah, that's very promising. Can't wait to read it. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
You're welcome.
And for talking to us. Thank you to Alina for your wonderful questions.
Yeah.
And thanks to everyone for your questions.
And hang in there, everybody. Hang in there.
Thank you, Harry.
Tough time right now. So hang in there.
Making it better. We're all making it's working out.
Good.
Thanks. Bye,
All right, everybody, feel free to keep in touch. You know where to find me.
Right? We wouldn't get to have you from LA in New York.
No, exactly.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much.
I'll talk to you all soon, okay?
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye, Lena. Bye, everybody. Christina.
Harry, thank you.
Hi. Hi. On the